I never expected my friend's son to sit beside me, but that one afternoon changed everything. The afternoon sunlight fell in golden patches across the patio, warming the stone tiles beneath her feet. She leaned back in the wicker chair, a soft sigh escaping her lips as she cradled her cup of tea. The gentle scent of jasmine from the garden mingled with the faint, sweet aroma of her chamomile tea, creating a quiet cocoon around her. It was one of those rare moments of pure, uninterrupted calm, a pause in the world that belonged only to her. From the corner of her eye, she noticed movement at the gate. A familiar figure stepped into the sunlight, hesitating for a heartbeat before walking across the lawn. It was him, her friend's son. He had grown in the months since she last saw him. The slightly awkward boy she remembered had become a young man, shoulders broader, gait steadier, but with that same hint of uncertainty in his eyes that had always made her instinctively protective. "Hey," he said, voice casual, but there was a tension under it, a subtle awareness that something in this space between them had changed. She smiled, offering a simple, "Hi," though her heart betrayed a flicker of surprise at his presence. Instead of taking the chair across from her, he moved to the one beside her. A small, almost imperceptible gesture, yet the effect was immediate. The proximity made the air feel different, charged in a way she wasn't expecting. Her hand tightened slightly around her cup, though she told herself it was just the warmth of the tea. They started with casual conversation. How school had been, a shared joke about his mother's latest project, the familiar rhythm of words that had always passed easily between them. But now, every glance seemed to hold a quiet weight. When he laughed at something she said, she noticed the warmth in his eyes, a kind of admiration she hadn't seen before. She caught herself studying the way sunlight caught the lighter strands of his hair, how his smile shifted slightly when he noticed her watching him. Even the smallest touch between them felt amplified. When his knee brushed hers as he shifted in the chair, it sent a subtle awareness through her, a flutter she hadn't anticipated. It was not awkward, not uncomfortable. It was charged with a silent acknowledgement that the world had subtly shifted. For a moment, she allowed herself to just notice. The warmth of his hand against the cool armrest, the soft brush of his sleeve against hers, the way his presence seemed to expand the quiet space of the patio into something intimate. Around them, the world went on. The gentle hum of distant traffic, the soft rustle of leaves, birds calling across the garden. But in this small, sunlit corner, time slowed. Words weren't as important as the shared silence. The way proximity and light, touch and glance, carried more meaning than any conversation could. By the time he finally spoke again, it was with a softer tone, as if he too had noticed the subtle shift. "It's nice out here," he said simply, and she realized, with a quiet thrill she couldn't fully name, that she agreed. Not just about the weather, but about this moment, this closeness, this unexpected intimacy that neither of them had planned but both were suddenly aware of. And so the afternoon began. Not with drama, not with confessions, but with the slow, undeniable feeling that something had changed between them, something delicate and fragile, waiting to be explored. The afternoon sun had softened now, spilling across the patio in warmer, gentler tones. She leaned slightly back in her chair, teacup in hand, letting the heat seep through her fingers. He sat beside her, shoulders relaxed yet carrying a subtle tension, as if he were measuring every gesture, every word. Their conversation started as casually as one might expect between family friends. Comments about the weather, updates on school or work, light teasing about shared acquaintances. But beneath the ease of familiarity, a new undercurrent had begun to weave itself into their interaction. He laughed at one of her offhand jokes, and she noticed, almost guiltily, how her chest warmed at the sound. It wasn't just the humor. There was an attentiveness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, the way he studied the expressions on her face as if trying to memorize them. She found herself doing the same, catching the way his fingers drummed lightly against the arm of the chair, the small tilt of his head when he listened. Every so often, their arms brushed, innocent, accidental, but each contact lingered longer than necessary. A fleeting awareness traveled through her that was both thrilling and unsettling. Her pulse quickened at the subtle, silent acknowledgement of proximity. A shared space that felt different than before, charged in ways neither had yet named. They spoke of little things: books, music, the way the afternoon air carried the scent of blooming jasmine. But the silences between their sentences grew heavier, layered with unspoken meaning. She noticed the way he shifted slightly closer when he leaned to point something out, how the sunlight caught the glint in his eyes just so, and how he seemed conscious of her presence in a new way. Their laughter came in bursts, punctuated by thoughtful pauses where they simply observed one another, reading the small gestures, the subtle cues, the quiet rhythms of each other's movements. For her, the most startling part was the realization that she was noticing him as more than just a friend's son. She caught herself wondering about the gentle slope of his shoulder, the faint dimple that appeared when he smiled, the quiet way he listened with full attention. He, too, seemed to tread carefully around the new tension, leaning in slightly but never overstepping, watching for signs of comfort or hesitation. A breeze rustled through the patio, brushing strands of hair across her cheek. He reached out instinctively to tuck them behind her ear, his fingers brushing her skin, lingering a heartbeat longer than necessary. She felt a small thrill, a silent acknowledgement that the world had shifted in ways neither could yet define. Even mundane conversation took on a new texture. When she spoke, she became acutely aware of his subtle nods, the way he tilted his head, how he matched her tone without thinking. Each gesture, each laugh, each accidental touch became a part of an unspoken dialogue, a language of awareness and curiosity that neither of them had intended to create, but now could not ignore. By the time the sun dipped slightly lower, casting long shadows across the patio, the casual conversation had transformed. It had become something more. A gentle, unspoken recognition that this afternoon was different, charged with possibility. Both were aware that a boundary had quietly shifted, and though neither spoke of it aloud, they felt the subtle pull of something new. A connection deeper than friendship, yet untested, delicate, and filled with quiet anticipation. The afternoon light had softened into a warm, honeyed glow, spilling across the patio like a quiet spotlight on their small corner of the world. She sipped her tea slowly, savoring the flavor and the lingering warmth against her palms. The conversation had shifted naturally, moving from small talk to something deeper. A shared moment from the past, the kind of memory that felt comforting yet revealing. "I remember the summer we all went to the lake," she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips as the memory surfaced. "Your mom was determined to teach me how to paddle a canoe. I ended up more in the water than on it." She laughed lightly, shaking her head. The sound was easy, unguarded, and she noticed the way he leaned in slightly, drawn into the story as if seeing the scene through her eyes. He chuckled, a soft, thoughtful sound. "I remember that. You looked not exactly graceful." He teased gently, his tone light, but there was something in his eyes, a warmth and attentiveness, that made her feel unexpectedly seen. Then he added, almost shyly, "I tried to help, but I kept ending up in the water too." His confession made her laugh again, and for a moment, they were two people reliving a moment that belonged to both of them, yet held new significance now. As they shared the memory, the distance between them seemed to shrink. The physical space of the patio, the chairs, the table, the sunlight, felt less important than the space they were creating in the conversation. She noticed how his presence had a grounding effect, how his eyes followed her every gesture without judgment, and how the small touches, his knee brushing hers as he shifted, the occasional near brush of fingers, carried a new, charged weight. The conversation deepened naturally. He shared a parallel memory from his own childhood, one that revealed a side of him she hadn't seen before, thoughtful, self-aware, and quietly vulnerable. She listened intently, feeling a surprising swell of protectiveness and admiration at his honesty. The way he spoke, the slight hesitation before each word, the way his gaze found hers when he wanted to emphasize a point, it all added layers to the connection forming between them. For her, the moment was subtle but profound. She realized that these shared memories, simple, seemingly ordinary stories, were building something far more meaningful than either of them could have anticipated. There was a comfort in the familiarity, but also a thrill in the realization that they were discovering each other in a new light. A soft breeze drifted across the patio, carrying the scent of jasmine and warm earth. He reached instinctively to brush a loose strand of hair from her face, and the touch lingered just long enough to make her heart skip. She caught the way he noticed it, his hand hovering a moment before withdrawing, as if he too was aware of the subtle charge in the gesture. Silence settled for a moment, but it was a shared silence, not awkward, comfortable, reflective. In that quiet, they both recognized the delicate shift in their relationship. The easy familiarity of friendship had deepened into something quieter, more intimate, and undeniably real. The afternoon stretched on, golden and unhurried, a gentle reminder that some connections reveal themselves slowly, and the best ones linger long after the sun has set. The afternoon had shifted again. The sunlight now filtered through the leaves in delicate, dancing patterns, casting shifting shadows across the patio. The air was warmer, carrying the faint hum of distant traffic and the soft rustle of the garden's leaves. She felt it, the subtle change in the atmosphere between them. What had begun as comfortable familiarity was now something heavier, charged, delicate. He shifted in his chair, leaning slightly closer to reach for his drink. His elbow brushed her arm just slightly, a contact so minimal it could have been accidental, but it caused a ripple of awareness to pass through her. She felt her chest tighten, a gentle flutter of nerves and anticipation, and she caught herself taking a slow, measured breath to steady herself. He noticed, of course, the fraction of hesitation in her movement, but didn't comment. Instead, he offered a small, quiet smile that seemed both apologetic and intentional. Their conversation slowed. Words came more deliberately now, as if each one carried weight. He asked about her day, how she had been feeling lately, his tone soft, careful, attentive. She responded with thoughtful pauses, her eyes following the sunlight that shimmered across the table, aware that he was watching her. Not impatiently, but with a curiosity that felt almost reverent. Each glance held an unspoken question, a desire to reach closer, to connect, to understand. The touches between them became more frequent, though still accidental, still tentative. His hand hovered near hers as he adjusted his sleeve, a brush of fingers as he handed her a napkin, the near touch of knees beneath the table. Every minor gesture sent sparks of awareness through her, making her acutely conscious of the space between them. She caught herself noticing details she hadn't before. The warmth of his skin, the subtle tilt of his head when he listened, the way his gaze softened when he laughed. Yet the tension was not entirely comfortable. It was threaded with hesitation, awareness of propriety, and the silent acknowledgement of the age difference that neither of them could ignore. She found herself wondering how far she could lean into this new closeness without crossing an invisible boundary. He, in turn, seemed to tread carefully, inching closer in posture and attention, but holding back from anything that might force a reaction she wasn't ready for. A light breeze stirred the air, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine, the faint sweetness of sun-warmed stone, and the unmistakable energy of something unspoken. She brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, feeling the faintest heat on her cheeks as he instinctively glanced at her. The shared awareness between them was tangible now, a quiet magnetic pull neither could deny. For a moment silence fell. Neither of them spoke, but their eyes held a conversation far deeper than words. She felt her heart rate quicken, a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. He leaned back slightly, his shoulder brushing hers in the softest of contacts, and she realized that this was no longer just a friendly visit. It was a turning point. Something was unfolding, something unspoken yet profoundly understood, and both of them were acutely aware of it. As the sunlight faded toward late afternoon, the quiet tension lingered like a promise. They hadn't crossed any lines, yet everything had shifted. The familiarity they had once taken for granted was now charged with possibility, anticipation, and the delicate thrill of a connection that neither had fully named, but both could feel, unmistakably, in the quiet rhythm of shared presence. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting the patio in a warm, golden light that softened every edge. Shadows stretched long across the stone floor, and the air carried the scent of jasmine mingled with the faint aroma of evening tea. She sat beside him, feeling the familiar weight of his presence. A comforting solidity, yet charged with something unspoken. Their conversation had shifted once more, from the light banter and playful recollections to a quieter, more honest territory. She found herself sharing something personal, a worry she hadn't voiced to anyone else that afternoon. Her voice was gentle, tinged with vulnerability, and he listened with complete attention. He didn't interrupt or rush her. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, elbows resting on his knees, gaze fixed on hers. There was a softness in his expression, a quiet empathy that made her chest ache in ways she hadn't anticipated. Sometimes I feel like I'm balancing everything on my own, she admitted softly, tracing the rim of her cup with a fingertip. Like no matter how much I do, there's always something more that needs me. Her words felt heavy even as they left her lips, but the tension eased as she saw the way he absorbed them, the subtle nods and the way his eyes didn't flinch. He responded slowly, deliberately, his voice low but steady. I get that. I felt that too. Like no matter how hard I try, I'm just a step behind. The admission was simple, yet it carried weight. She realized, with a quiet surprise, how comforting it was to hear him voice the same struggles, how connected she felt in this shared vulnerability. As he spoke, their hands brushed lightly on the armrest between them. Neither pulled away. The touch was small, almost accidental, but it anchored the moment, making her acutely aware of him in a way that was more than casual. She noticed the warmth of his skin, the subtle tension in his fingers, the way his presence seemed to offer both safety and possibility. There was a pause, the kind that feels infinite in its significance. Neither needed to fill it with words. In that quiet, she felt the unspoken acknowledgement of connection, the realization that this young man, her friend's son, understood her in a way few could. He had seen her vulnerabilities and accepted them without judgment, and the awareness of that acceptance sent a gentle thrill through her chest. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to notice the small details. The soft curve of his jaw in the golden light, the way his eyes softened when he smiled, the subtle rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. She felt a surprising warmth spreading through her. An intimacy not physical, but emotional, profound, and utterly consuming. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of pink and amber, they sat side by side in comfortable silence. Each was aware of the subtle electricity in the space between them, the quiet acknowledgement that something significant was growing. It wasn't rush or desire. It was trust, understanding, and the kind of connection that left an indelible mark. In that soft glow, with shadows stretching and evening settling around them, she realized something she hadn't expected. This afternoon had transformed into more than casual conversation. It had become a moment of deep emotional intimacy, a gentle tether binding them in quiet, unspoken understanding, a bond that neither distance, age, nor circumstance could easily undo. The late afternoon had surrendered to early evening, and the patio was bathed in a soft, golden pink light. Shadows stretched long, brushing across the stone tiles, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine, mingling with the warmth of the fading sun. The quiet hum of the neighborhood created a gentle backdrop, unnoticed by either of them, because in this moment, nothing else seemed to exist. They sat side by side, chairs slightly angled toward one another, their shoulders nearly touching. He had shifted closer without thinking, drawn by a subtle, magnetic pull neither had named aloud. She noticed it instantly, the closeness, the warmth, the shared awareness that was slowly threading itself into every glance and gesture. He spoke softly, hesitant, choosing his words as if testing the weight of each one. It's been nice, just being here with you, he admitted, voice low, almost swallowed by the evening air. She felt a quiet flutter in her chest at the simplicity of his words. It was casual enough to seem innocent, yet the tone carried something more. A longing, a recognition, a vulnerability that mirrored her own feelings. For a long moment, neither moved. Their eyes met and held, carrying a silent conversation that neither dared to voice. The air between them seemed to thrum with anticipation. She felt her fingers brush against the edge of her cup, a small act of grounding herself, while every part of her senses screamed that this was a turning point, delicate, fragile, yet unmistakably significant. He shifted again, leaning forward to point at a distant tree in the fading sunlight, his elbow brushing hers lightly. The contact lingered just a fraction longer than it should have, sending an electric awareness through her. Their proximity was no longer casual. It was intimate, charged, and perfectly balanced on the edge of possibility. I wanted to say something, he murmured, hesitating. The words caught between courage and restraint. His hand hovered near hers for a moment, almost touching, then retreated. The gesture was small, but it carried the weight of everything unspoken, the curiosity, the growing affection, the subtle tension of age, propriety, and uncharted feelings. She swallowed softly, feeling her pulse quicken, the evening air suddenly warmer, heavier with unvoiced emotion. She could sense his awareness of her reaction, the way his gaze lingered on her face, trying to read her thoughts, trying to gauge her comfort, trying to find permission in her silence. The moment stretched, delicate and electric, neither breaking the unspoken rule of restraint. The sun dipped further, casting the patio in soft twilight. Shadows deepened, yet the warmth of the lingering sunlight painted their connection in gentle hues. They sat in quiet together, both acutely aware of the subtle pull between them, both conscious of the lines they had yet to cross, both aching for a closer step they weren't ready to take. For the first time, she recognized the truth of what was happening. This wasn't just a friendly visit. It was a delicate dance of awareness and restraint, an unspoken confession waiting to bloom. And in that quiet, golden light, the weight of possibility settled over them, heavy, fragile, and utterly intoxicating. If you want, I can expand Keynote 7 next, 500 words, which brings the story to its emotional resolution and a satisfying conclusion while keeping it slow burn, YouTube safe, and deeply touching. Should I go ahead with that? You said, expand Keynote 7, 500 words. ChatGPT said, absolutely. Here's a fully expanded Keynote 7, 500 words. For, my friend's son sat beside me on the patio. You won't believe what happened. Delivering a satisfying emotional resolution while keeping the slow burn, YouTube-friendly style. Part 7. Emotional resolution, expanded. The sky had shifted from the soft gold of late afternoon to a tender twilight, streaked with pink and lavender. The patio, now bathed in the gentle glow of evening, seemed to shrink into an intimate cocoon, a world apart from everything else. The distant sounds of the neighborhood, the hum of cars, the occasional bark of a dog, faded into the background, leaving only the quiet rhythm of their presence together. They sat side by side, the small space between them charged yet comfortable, filled with unspoken words and lingering glances. The earlier tension, the delicate awareness of something more than friendship, had not dissipated, but it had softened into a mutual understanding. Neither needed to force conversation. The silence itself had become a language, rich with acknowledgement, curiosity, and respect. She traced the rim of her teacup slowly, letting her fingers linger, aware of his subtle movements beside her. He shifted slightly, their shoulders brushing lightly. A touch so small it could have been accidental, yet it carried a deliberate warmth. Her chest tightened at the sensation, a gentle reminder of everything that had been building between them over the afternoon. I'm glad you stayed, he said finally, his voice low and steady, breaking the silence without shattering it. It wasn't a confession, not yet, but it held the weight of something deeper. The honesty in his tone, the care with which he chose each word, made her heart stir in ways she hadn't anticipated. She turned toward him, catching his gaze. Their eyes met, and in that instant the world seemed to narrow to the space between them. She realized she didn't need grand gestures or declarations. The quiet acknowledgement of their bond, The simple act of sitting side by side and sharing this moment was enough. "I'm glad too," she murmured, a soft smile touching her lips. Her voice carried relief, warmth, and a hint of longing, subtle enough to respect boundaries, but real enough to acknowledge what had grown between them. He reached out slowly, hesitating just enough to make her heart skip. Their fingers met, lightly, almost accidentally at first, but then lingered, entwining with the natural ease of trust and familiarity. It was not a passionate grasp. It was something quieter, profound. A tether that said, "I see you. I understand you. Care." They stayed like that for a while, hands brushing, shoulders occasionally touching, watching the colors of the sky deepen into indigo and violet. In that space, the age difference, the social boundaries, the hesitation, all of it became secondary to the connection they had nurtured. What mattered was the intimacy, the respect, the mutual recognition of feelings that words alone could not capture. As the first stars began to twinkle above, they stood together, reluctant to break the spell but knowing the evening had to end. A gentle hug followed, long enough to convey gratitude, warmth, and the unspoken understanding of something that had begun but not yet been fully defined. He lingered a moment longer, offering a quiet, reassuring smile that said more than words ever could. Walking back inside, she realized that the afternoon had changed something within her. This connection, delicate, slow-burning, respectful, was a rare gift. Whether it would grow into something more, or remain a beautiful memory, she knew that the bond they shared would linger, shaping the way they saw each other forever. And in the quiet of the evening, as the stars emerged one by one, there was a sense of completion, a feeling that what had begun on the patio, through laughter, vulnerability, and shared awareness, had reached a satisfying, tender resolution. The story between them was far from over, but for this moment it was perfect. If this slow burn story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter of age gap romance and heartwarming stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what part of this story moved you the most.